The termination letter sat between us like a bomb. My head still pounded from the fever that had kept me in bed for 3 days. Sweat clung to my forehead despite the office air conditioning. Across the desk, my boss Tyler Morrison leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, watching me with cold satisfaction. "If you can't handle showing up for work, you don't deserve to be here," he said. His voice was sharp, cutting through the fog in my brain. I stared at the paper, at my name printed in bold letters above the word termination. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream to defend myself, to remind him of every late night and weekend I'd sacrificed for this company. But nothing came out. I just sat there, trembling, while he smirked like he'd won some kind of victory. That moment burned itself into my memory. It was the moment everything changed. My hands shook as I picked up the letter. The words blurred together, but I caught the important parts. Immediate termination, effective today, no severance beyond standard policy. Tyler tapped his pen against the desk, impatient for me to leave. "I'll need your badge and laptop before you go," he said, not even looking at me anymore. He was already moving on, checking his phone like I was nothing, like the past 3 years meant nothing. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and suffocating. But I swallowed it down. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I placed the letter back on his desk, stood up slowly, and met his eyes. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He laughed. Actually laughed. "I don't think so, Natalie. You're replaceable." That word echoed in my head as I walked out. Replaceable. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and until 30 minutes ago, I was the project coordinator at Summit Tech Solutions. That title doesn't sound impressive, I know. But it meant everything to me. I'd started there right out of college, eager and full of dreams about building something meaningful. For 3 years I poured myself into that job. I learned every system, memorized every client's preferences, stayed late when everyone else went home. I thought hard work meant job security. I thought loyalty meant something. I was wrong. Now I stood in the parking lot, holding a cardboard box with my desk plant and a coffee mug, watching my coworkers through the glass windows. None of them had said goodbye. They'd avoided my eyes when I packed up my things. They knew what Tyler had done was wrong, but nobody spoke up. The drive home felt endless. My apartment was quiet and cold when I stepped inside. I dropped the box by the door and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Amy. "Just heard. Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I wasn't okay. I was furious and humiliated and terrified. How was I going to pay rent? What would I tell my parents? They'd been so proud when I got this job. I'd worked myself sick, literally, and this was my reward. Termination. Fired for calling in sick once. After 3 years of perfect attendance, of covering for Tyler's mistakes, of making him look good in front of executives. He'd taken credit for my work so many times I'd lost count. And now he'd thrown me away like garbage. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling sorry for myself. Then something shifted inside me. Anger turned into determination. The next morning, I woke up with clarity I hadn't felt in months. My fever had broken. My head was clear. And I realized something important. Tyler had done me a favor. Not intentionally, of course. But by firing me, he'd freed me from a job that was slowly killing me. I'd been so focused on proving myself, on being indispensable, that I'd forgotten to take care of myself. The burnout had been building for months. The late nights, the skipped meals, the constant stress of keeping everything together while Tyler took all the glory. I'd been running on empty for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe. Now I had a choice. I could look for another corporate job, another boss who might treat me the same way. Or I could do something different. Something for myself. I opened my laptop and started researching. Freelance consulting. Independent contracting. Building my own client base. Summit Tech Solutions had been struggling for over a year, though most people didn't know it. From the outside everything looked fine. We had a nice office, big-name clients, press releases about growth and innovation. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Tyler was obsessed with landing prestigious deals that looked good on paper but made no financial sense. He'd ignore smaller, stable clients, the ones who actually paid their bills on time, to chase after flashy partnerships that never materialized. Meanwhile, those stable clients were growing frustrated. Projects ran late. Communication broke down. Quality slipped. And guess who fixed everything? Me. I'd work weekends to catch up on deadlines Tyler had missed. I'd call angry clients and smooth things over with apologies and promises. I'd redo presentations because Tyler's version was full of errors. I kept that company running while he played businessman. And he never once acknowledged it. The burnout crept up slowly, then hit me all at once. It started with exhaustion that coffee couldn't fix. Then came the headaches, the knots in my shoulders, the nights when I'd lie awake worrying about deadlines. I stopped seeing friends, stopped exercising, lived on takeout and stress. My mom noticed during our weekly phone calls. "You sound tired, honey. Are you taking care of yourself?" I'd brush it off, promise I was fine, then work another 12-hour day. The week before I got sick, we'd lost a major client. Tyler had ignored their concerns for months, and they'd finally had enough. He blamed me in the meeting with the executives, said I'd dropped the ball on communication. I sat there speechless while he rewrote history. Nobody corrected him. That night I went home and cried for the first time in years. 2 days later, I woke up with a fever of 102. I'd called Tyler that morning, my voice weak and scratchy. "I'm really sick," I'd said. "I need to stay home today." Silence on the other end. Then, "We have the Henderson presentation tomorrow. You need to be here." I'd explained that I could barely stand, that I'd see a doctor, that I'd be back as soon as possible. He'd sighed, annoyed, like my illness was a personal inconvenience to him. Fine. But this better not become a habit. Like I was some lazy employee who called in sick every week. I'd never missed a single day in 3 years. When I came back 2 days later, still pale and weak, my desk had been cleared. My computer was gone. A security guard stood nearby, waiting to escort me to Tyler's office. I'd known then, walking down that hallway, that something terrible was about to happen. But I never imagined he'd actually fire me. Not for being sick. Not after everything I'd done. I didn't make a scene when I left. Could have. Part of me wanted to march into the main office and tell everyone exactly what Tyler had done. Let them see what kind of person he really was. But I didn't. I collected my things quietly, handed over my badge and laptop, and walked out with my head up. My former co-workers watched from their desks, expressions ranging from pity to relief that it wasn't them. Only one person spoke to me, Kyle from accounting. He caught me by the elevator and whispered, "This is wrong. Everyone knows it." I'd nodded, not trusting my voice, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Tyler through his office window, already on the phone, probably talking about how he'd handled a personnel problem. That's all I was to him. Problem he'd solved. He had no idea what he'd just done. The first week was hard. I let myself feel everything, the anger, the humiliation, the fear about money. I ate ice cream for dinner and watched too much television. I ignored calls from concerned friends who'd heard what happened. But by the end of that week, something shifted. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through job listings that all looked the same, when I thought, why am I trying to find another Tyler? Another boss who'll undervalue me. I'd been good at my job. Really good. Clients had always praised my work, even when Tyler took credit for it. I knew how to manage projects, handle difficult personalities, solve problems under pressure. Those skills didn't disappear just because Tyler fired me. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, Natalie Brooks Consulting. Then I started writing down everything I could offer. Project management, client relations, process optimization, emergency troubleshooting. By midnight I had a business plan. My first client came from an unexpected place. I'd posted on a few freelance websites, not expecting much, when I got a message from a small marketing firm called Brightside Creative. They needed help organizing a product launch that was spiraling out of control. The timeline was tight, just 2 weeks, and their internal team was overwhelmed. It was exactly the kind of mess I'd cleaned up 100 times at Summit Tech. I met with the owner, a woman named Patricia who was stressed but kind. She explained the chaos: missed deadlines, confused team members, a client who was losing patience. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said apologetically. "And we can't pay much." I took the job anyway. Not for the money, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could do this. That Tyler had been wrong. I threw myself into that project like my life depended on it. Within 3 days, I'd created a new timeline, streamlined their workflow, and set up daily check-ins. The Brightside Creative launch was a success. Patricia was thrilled. She paid me the agreed amount, then added a bonus I hadn't expected. "You saved us," she said, shaking my hand. "Can I keep your number? We'll definitely need you again." Word spread quickly in her network. Within a week, I had 2 more inquiries. A tech startup needed help managing their first major client relationship. A non-profit was drowning in a grant application process and needed someone to organize their materials. Both projects were small, but they paid. More importantly, they reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I was good at this. Really good. Better than good. The clients weren't just satisfied, they were impressed. They sent thank you emails, left glowing reviews, referred me to their colleagues. For the first time in years, I felt valued. Not as Tyler's assistant or his scapegoat, but as Natalie Brooks, professional problem solver. Meanwhile, Summit Tech Solutions was falling apart. I didn't know this immediately, of course. I was too busy building my new business to pay attention to my old workplace. But about 2 weeks after I was fired, I started hearing things. A former coworker texted me. "Chaos here. The Hartford account is a mess." Another sent. "Tyler hired your replacement. She quit after 3 days." I didn't respond, but I was curious. The Hartford account had been one of my biggest responsibilities. It was a complicated client with very specific needs, and I'd spent months building that relationship. Tyler barely knew their names. A few days later, I got a direct message on a professional networking site. It was from someone at Hartford Technologies, asking if I was available for consulting work. "We've had some issues with our current vendor," they wrote carefully. "We're looking for outside help." I knew immediately what had happened. Summit Tech had dropped the ball, and Hartford was looking for a way out. I took the Hartford consulting job. It felt risky, working with my old company's client, but they'd reached out to me, not the other way around. And they were desperate. Their main contact, a director named Marcus, was relieved when we talked on the phone. "Look, I don't know what happened over there," he said, referring to Summit Tech, "but everything's been falling apart since you left. Missed deadlines, wrong deliverables, nobody returning calls. We're considering canceling the contract." I didn't badmouth Tyler or Summit Tech. I didn't have to. I just listened, took notes, and explained how I could help. Within a week, I'd fixed the immediate problems and created a plan to get them back on track. Marcus was impressed. "This is the level of service we used to get," he said. "Where did it go?" I smiled politely and changed the subject. But I knew exactly where it had gone. It had left when Tyler fired me. Over the next 2 weeks, my business grew faster than I'd imagined possible. I took on 4 more clients, all small businesses or departments within larger companies that needed short-term project help. I worked from my apartment, setting my own hours, choosing my own projects. The freedom was intoxicating. No more Tyler looking over my shoulder, taking credit, making impossible demands. No more sacrificing my health for someone else's ego. I was making decent money. Not as much as my old salary yet, but enough to cover rent and expenses. More importantly, I was happy. Truly happy. I woke up excited to work instead of dreading it. My headaches disappeared. I started sleeping through the night. I even went to yoga classes with Amy again, something I hadn't had time for in over a year. "You look different," Amy said one evening. "Less tired. More you." She was right. I was finding myself again. 3 weeks after Tyler fired me, a former coworker named Vanessa texted me late at night. "You need to know what's happening here," she wrote. "Tyler is losing it." She sent me a long message describing the chaos at Summit Tech. Multiple clients were complaining. 2 had already left, taking their contracts elsewhere. The new project coordinator, my replacement's replacement, was overwhelmed and making mistakes. Tyler was working longer hours than ever, trying to fix problems himself, but he didn't actually know how to do the work. He'd always had me to handle the details while he focused on the big picture. Now he was drowning in those details. "He's been asking about you," Vanessa added. "Wanting to know if anyone's heard from you, what you're doing now." I read her messages with a strange sense of satisfaction. Not because I wanted Tyler to suffer, though I won't lie there was some of that, but because it proved something important. I hadn't been replaceable after all. Tyler's management style had always been aggressive, but according to Vanessa, he'd become unbearable. He snapped at employees in meetings. He sent angry emails at 2 in the morning. He blamed everyone else for problems that were clearly his fault. The office morale was terrible. People were updating their resumes, looking for ways out. Summit Tech's reputation in the industry was suffering too. Word gets around in professional circles when a company starts missing deadlines and losing clients. Vendors were cautious. Potential new clients were choosing competitors. The company Tyler had been so proud of was crumbling, and he had no idea how to stop it. I heard all this through the grapevine. Former co-workers who reached out, industry contacts who mentioned Summit Tech's troubles. I never initiated these conversations, but I listened. And privately I felt vindicated. Tyler had called me replaceable. He'd fired me for being human, for getting sick. Now he was learning the hard way just how wrong he'd been. A month after my termination, Summit Tech lost the Carrington contract. This was huge news in our industry. Carrington Industries was their biggest client, worth 6 figures annually. I'd managed that relationship for 2 years, and it had been solid, until I left. According to my sources, Carrington had given Summit Tech multiple chances to fix their declining service quality. They'd complained about missed deadlines, poor communication, and sloppy work. Tyler had made promises, but nothing changed. Finally, Carrington pulled the contract and gave it to a competitor. The financial hit to Summit Tech was massive. Without Carrington, they were losing a significant portion of their annual revenue. I found out about it when Vanessa called me, practically shouting into the phone. "Did you hear? Carrington's gone. The executives are panicking. There's talk about layoffs." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction that Tyler was facing consequences. Guilt that other people might lose their jobs because of his incompetence. But mostly, I felt grateful that I'd gotten out when I did. My reputation was growing. I wasn't trying to build a brand or make a name for myself. I was just doing good work for every client I took on. But in the world of business consulting, especially in a mid-sized city like ours, word travels fast. A month into my freelance career, I was getting inquiries from companies I'd never heard of. They'd been referred by satisfied clients or had seen my reviews online. I was selective about which projects I accepted. I didn't want to overextend myself the way I had at Summit Tech. I wanted to maintain the balance I'd found, the peace that came from controlling my own schedule. But I said yes to the interesting challenges, the projects that excited me. I helped a struggling restaurant chain reorganize their supply system. I coached a nonprofit through a major donor campaign. I even did some work for a small tech company that reminded me why I'd loved this industry in the first place. People started calling me the woman who saves companies. I laughed when I first heard it, but secretly I liked it. One morning, exactly 30 days after Tyler fired me, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Natalie. It's Tyler Morrison." My heart stopped. His voice was different than I remembered. Strained, uncertain. None of the arrogance that had been there during our last conversation. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." he continued when I didn't respond. I was hoping we could talk. I found my voice. About what? About coming back to Summit Tech. We need you, Natalie. I need you. The words hung in the air. A month ago, I would have done anything to hear him say that. I would have felt validated, victorious. But now, sitting in my quiet apartment with my laptop open and my calendar full of clients who actually valued me, I felt nothing. Just a mild curiosity about how this conversation would go. I'm working, I said simply. I'll call you back later. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't call him back. Instead, Tyler showed up at my apartment that evening. I heard the knock and checked the peephole, then stood there for a long moment, deciding whether to open the door. Finally, I did. He stood in the hallway, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Wrinkled shirt. Dark circles under his eyes. The confident swagger completely gone. Natalie, please. Can we talk? I crossed my arms but stepped aside to let him in. He walked into my small living room, looking around like he was surprised by how normal it was. Like he'd expected to find me broken and desperate. I made a mistake, he said, turning to face me. Firing you was a mistake. I want to offer you your old position back. Better pay. Better title. Whatever you want. I let him keep talking, watching him squirm, seeing the desperation in his eyes. Finally, I held up my hand. Stop, I said. Just stop. Tyler looked confused, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't jumping at his offer. I'm offering you your job back, he said slowly, like I hadn't understood. With a raise. Isn't that what you want? I almost laughed. No, Tyler. It's not. I sat down on my couch, leaving him standing. Do you want to know what I've been doing for the past month? I've built my own consulting business. I have clients who respect me, who value my work, who don't take credit for my ideas. I set my own hours. I choose my own projects. I'm making more money than you ever paid me, and I'm actually happy. His face went pale. You can't be serious. You're really choosing freelance work over a stable job. It's not about stability, I said. It's about respect. You called me replaceable. You fired me for being sick. You spent 3 years taking credit for my work while treating me like an assistant. Why would I ever come back to that? Tyler tried different tactics. First, he appealed to loyalty. After everything we built together. I cut him off. You mean everything I built while you took credit? Then he tried guilt. The company is struggling. People might lose their jobs. That's on you, I said firmly. You created this situation by ignoring the clients I warned you about, by chasing deals that made no sense, by firing the one person who kept everything running. Finally, he got angry. You're being vindictive. You want to see me fail. I stood up, tired of this conversation. Tyler, I don't think about you at all anymore. You're not my problem. Your failing company isn't my problem. You fired me, remember? You told me I was replaceable. So go replace me. I walked to the door and opened it. I have work to do. Real work. For clients who appreciate me. You need to leave. He stood there for another moment, then walked out without another word. After Tyler left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Part of me couldn't believe what had just happened. I turned down a job offer from the company that fired me. I told off the boss who'd made my life miserable. Chosen myself. The next morning I got an email from Tyler. A formal offer letter with numbers even higher than what he'd mentioned. I deleted it without responding. Then I opened my calendar and looked at the week ahead. 3 client meetings, 2 project deadlines, and a consultation call with a potential new client who'd been referred by Hartford Technologies. My business was thriving. I was thriving. I thought about that moment in Tyler's office a month ago, when he'd called me replaceable. How small I'd felt. How powerless. I wasn't that person anymore. I'd learned something important. Being fired wasn't the end of my career. It was the beginning of something better. Something I'd built for myself. 6 months later, I stood in my new office space. Just a small room I rented in a co-working building, but it was mine. My client list had grown to include some of the biggest names in our industry. I'd hired an assistant to help with scheduling and administrative tasks. I was making twice what I'd earned at Summit Tech, and I had control over my own life. I heard through the grapevine that Tyler had been forced out by the board of directors. Summit Tech was restructuring, trying to repair the damage his poor management had caused. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just relief that I wasn't there anymore. My mom called one evening, proud and supportive as always. "I always knew you were capable of great things," she said. "I'm so glad you're finally seeing it yourself." I looked around my office at the thank you cards from clients, at the calendar full of projects I was excited about, at the life I'd built from scratch. Losing that job had felt like the worst thing that could happen. Now I saw it for what it really was. Freedom. Tyler had done me a favor. He just didn't know it.